This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Our conversation this morning is on ending al-majiri on the streets, and the topic was first discussed on the program precisely on the 3rd of March. To set the tone for part 2 of the topic, let's listen to excerpts of the first part of the discussion as put together by correspondent Oyeyemi Ajayi.
We have to have the stakeholders, and I think it has been mentioned, the parent has to be on board. It's irresponsible for any parent to come and say that, look here, I've just gone to a madam, given him a child, and that's it. How he feeds, where he sleeps, isn't it, whether he's studying or not, and so on, is not my problem. We have to change attitudes and behavior to a point that people should feel responsible for their words.
There is need for collaborative effort between the state, in particular the Northern Governors Forum. They need to come together, speak with one voice, because if Kano is doing its own effort, then other states are not equally responding, reciprocating, then you're going to have a problem. Whatever Kano does will not be sustainable.
There is a shift also from UNICEF end to make sure that these children have the basic education that is required. UNICEF, is supporting, as I said earlier, the integration of Quranic Sangaya education. This is what we are doing in most of the states. But before doing that, we supported about 7 states, to track, to map household and to track out of school children. And then the results are really amazing, from those states, and that's what gives us the directions, and then give us, the power to have more consultations with parents, with stakeholders, with other development bodies, to see how we can come up together and strategize for these children.
Indeed, we need almost a single framework that can be adopted and replicated across board, a uniform one, and that is what I strongly believe the Northern Governors need to lock some people in a room.
All right, lock some people in the room and then get them to think out what options will be best in the circumstance to help deal with the al-majiri phenomenon, which of course we are returning to again today. We have guests with us here in the studios and also from our network center in Kaduna, and another guest will be joining us via Skype from Gombe. From Gombe. Now, first let's welcome His Excellency, distinguished Senator and former Governor of Kano State, and also former Minister of Education of the Federal Republic, Ibrahim Shekarau. Pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Also here with us in the studios is Nuruddin Lemu. Nuruddin Lemu is Director of Research and Training of Islamic Education Trust. Pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Okay.
And from our Gombe studio, we have Mariama Bukar Dikwa, education specialist, and I heard that she is not ready, actually, Kinsley. So in Kaduna, we have Dr. Khalid Abubakar Aliu, Secretary General, Jamaatul Nasrul Islam, JNI. Thank you for joining us too. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. Kinsley.
All right. Once again, our pleasure to have you join us. You listened to excerpts of that conversation that we had last week. It was last week, Tuesday. Very heated, very interesting. A number of perspectives, came up, with regard to the causative factors, and also discussing the approaches now that some state governments are also adopting. In particular, Kano was very well represented on that occasion. And luckily, we have the former governor of Kano who is here with us. He also in the Senate. He also a Minister of Education in a previous administration. Just tell us, why has the al-majiri phenomenon become so dysfunctional today? And therefore, we're all up in arms, as it were, to help solve the problem.
Well, thank you very much. I think the fact is that this issue of the roaming around children is a concern of every responsible citizen in Nigeria. And I think the concern has been growing as a result of the growth in population. One thing that I will want to remind us quickly is that this Angea program, I hate to call it al-majiri schools, al-majiri program. It is the Angea Quranic schools. This had been a system that has been as long as the Islamic education is in the northern part of Nigeria. You're talking about almost 1,000 years. What really brought all these are what I always call historical accidents. You know, when the Western system of education was first coming up to the northern part of Nigeria, it was being brought by the missionaries, the Christian missionaries. So the leaders of that time distanced themselves from it. If that system had been accommodated into the schooling system, this problem wouldn't have been there. Unfortunately, the neglect has been growing over time. The concern of most governments had been on the formal system of the Western system of education. The Quranic education was left to the public to handle because of the few number of the schools and the children at that time. When you talk of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, not much attention was drawn to it. But as we go into the years from early 80s, the number of the schools were increasing, of course, with the population explosion, as we all know. So it is growing, and then the economic challenges, the management of the Angea schools by individual malams was becoming a problem due to economic challenges. They could no longer contain them, they could no longer manage the explosion of the population, the number of children coming onto them. So that was the beginning of the concern. And unfortunately, as a result of general approach to the problem by different states, every state government was approaching it in its own ways. There is no common ground, no template, no program that needs to be addressed. And I think time has come now that we all have to put hands on the deck, right from the center, to coordinate. That is the first thing we need to do. If we continue in this approach, every state addressing it the way it wants. We started this Angea program. I set up a special directorate of the Angea program right from 2003. For 8 years we are running it. But unfortunately, since our states don't have any close borders, these problems are still coming in. If we have a common program, Kano has the same program, Kaduna has the same, Bauchi has the same, Katsina has the same. If you Katsina boy or child leaves Katsina, comes to Kano, you find the same program in his state is running. So we had these difficulties. Some of us did our best to share these among the states at that time. But unfortunately, it is a forum of equals. When you talk of the Northern Governors Forum, when the federal government came up, shortly before I became the minister, then they started getting concerned. That was the time the Jonathan government decided to build some few schools they call al-majiri schools. Unfortunately, that program was not properly coordinated. The states were not taken along. The local governments were not taken along. Government just went out and built up schools. There was no sensitization of the malams, the proprietors of the Angea schools. You don't just come and take them, build classroom, expecting these teachers of the Angea schools who are not used to a chalk and blackboard system. You just jump onto them. There has to be a lot of sensitization. I'm happy, for example, in my state in Kano, they've taken it to the next step from where we left, trying to introduce some modern approach to it. Our concern then was even to have access to the schools, to have the statistics. In 2003, 2004, when we first came on board and the directorate commenced work, we went out to take some census. In Kano, we found about 27,000 of such schools. And from our statistics, there were almost 5 times more children in these Angea schools than even in your primary schools. So you need to have all these statistics so that you plan ahead. It's not just about jumping on building schools and asking them, recruiting teachers left, right, and center. We have to have
a projection for years. This is a system that lasted for almost 600 years, and you want them overnight to go into a system that is less than about 100 years. So it needs a lot of coordination. It needs a lot of cooperation between states. All the states that are involved have to come together. There was a committee set up under Professor Shogaladenchi when government, shortly after submission of the report, we left government. I don't know what becomes of that report, but there was a comprehensive study as to how we should approach it. It has to be a gradual thing. You see, expecting a sudden change will not arrive. You have to project. We only talk of 10 million children out of school. This is just a figure, a projected figure. We need to go state by state, find out the number of the Nzangaya schools. Not all the children on the street are even from the Quranic schools. Some of them are just street children, creating societal problems and so on. But if we take the statistics of formal, organized Nzangaya schools state by state, let's get the statistics, let's get the number, let's sensitize the proprietors of these Nzangaya schools to understand what is coming on board, so that when you have the number, when you have the statistics, then you can plan for it. And it has to be, there has to be a coordinating body, generally. If every state is doing it on its own, I don't think we'll get there.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll come back to you on that. Building on what he has said, the intervention, some experts say, has been long overdue. But what are we not getting right now?
I think in many ways we oversimplify the problem. We look at it sometimes with the lens of education, that this is just a former education and there's a dislocation, a fracture somewhere, and the need to just integrate, have a new curriculum on schools, and that will solve the problem. When even our conventional schools, look at the dropout rates. In some states, you have over 90% dropout rates from primary to secondary school. In some, you've got another 90 or higher percent from secondary to tertiary. So when you ask how well is the current system working, when you tell someone, get your child away from this system into an alternative system, you have not made the alternative system attractive enough for a lot of people. Having said that, it's not just an education problem, it's tied also to rural poverty. You have parents who are in the far north who, due to desertification, the smaller sizes of farms due to population explosion, the harvest is not enough for the whole family for the year. And so they have to send their children to town. A lot of their older children go to town to work on kabu-kabu motorcycles, laboring, just unskilled laborers pushing water here and there. But when the farming season comes, they go back home, farm, and then come back and let their parents benefit. So I think you're looking at a problem that is tied to rural poverty, that is tied to parental duty, sometimes irresponsibility. Sometimes the parent has been made to believe that sending their child for religious education is the responsible thing to do. Sometimes you have a problem of what, in all honesty, you will just say is child slavery by other names, because you find the condition in which these children are staying. Even the malam sometimes, I'm not generalizing because of the diversity of schools that we are now calling Quranic or al-majiri educational system. But sometimes the malam himself, who will accommodate these al-majiris, send them to beg, his own children are going to school. Sometimes his own children who will be facilitated to even study overseas. So you do have that problem. You have the problem of how dysfunctional the alternative education they're being shown is. Sometimes it's a problem of joblessness within urban areas, where the malam himself is not empowered. And so it's a symbiotic relationship where he will give them some education, they will do some begging, His wives and family will do the cooking, he will provide accommodation, and so it's an economy of the poor, which after a while, unfortunately, gets a lot of people trapped in. You have migration problems, urbanization problems, which happen in every society. People think better life is in the urban areas, just to come to the urban areas and see it's not just as good. In a similar way, we have Nigerians traveling overseas believing that greener pastures are out there. It's when they get there they realize it's not really as rosy. You still have within the mentality of some of the Malams the idea that Western education is haram. You still have in the minds of some Malams, we have some Imams who would tell us that their own teachers would tell them, you can't come and learn Islam in my school if you are still going to that secondary school. So you still have that mentality among a particular demographic within that system. So I think we have to look at the causes. We have to recognize a lot of what we are seeing is an effect. And you can't keep mopping the floor if the tap is still running. So this issue of how do we address the current problem when that demographic in the population has a fertility rate and a growth rate of over 6%, they're still being born, they're still going through that system. So the need to really look at it from a very holistic, that we're not looking at just 10 million children. We're looking at parents, we're looking at teachers, we're looking at a whole population that's not as small as we're dealing with.
All right, Nuruddin, thank you very much there for your viewpoints. Incidentally, I mean, this is the core issues that you have touched on. We also raised last week, you have amplified and also further extended, you know, the causative factors and then the effect that we are seeing with us. Let's go over to our Kaduna Network Center, where a moment ago you saw Dr. Khalid Aliyu, who is Secretary General of Jamaatul Nasir Islam. Dr. Khalid, give us your own perspective on what again, I put the question, has become a dysfunctional al-majiri system.
Thank you and good morning all. I think the problem is being scratched by the powers that be, meaning the government. I think we have talked a lot on these really phenomenon of the either Sangaya schools or al-majiri schools. We have been talking and talking and talking at all levels, but those concerned and
we have a technical hitch there. Can we go over to the Skype where we earlier introduced Mariama Dikwa, who is of UNICEF. She was with us last week, by the way, when we discussed this conversation. If we can't see her on the split screen, that means that our engineers are also trying to clear that up. All right, so Mariama Dikwa, pleasure to have you with us again on Good Morning Nigeria. Last week you were in Maiduguri and now you are in Gombe. Join us via Skype. Again, I mean, of course, you already expressed your views last week, but I'm sure you've had the benefit of listening to the former governor of Kano State, and Nuruddin Lemu, who is Director of Research and Training of the Islamic Education Trust. The perspectives that have been elaborated on to say that, look, we are faced with a demographic challenge, we are faced essentially also with a cultural issue, border control is also being indicated, and more importantly, as Nuruddin has indicated this morning, we are dealing perhaps with an economy of the poor that incorporates, you know, child trafficking, child slavery, and all kinds of things. What are your thoughts on this, so that we don't look at it, as has been suggested, from just a single lens of education? We
seem to have found we have a problem with the Skype.
All right, the Skype has gone off. Okay, so whenever we do get it back on, we will return to those two guests, the Secretary General of Jamaatul Nasir Islam in our Kaduna Network Center, and then the Skype from Gombe. Well, back to our studios here. Well, of course, you are close to Nuruddin, so you heard what he said in terms of the economy of the poor. But more importantly, amongst the other very significant points that you raised, you talked about the Professor Shehu Galadenchi report on reform. Now, who initiated that committee, or who set up that committee, and to whom was the report submitted? And so, with hindsight, what were the highlights of the report before we start getting to why it failed to be implemented?
I think the government of Jonathan, before I came on board as a minister, I think the committee was set up during Professor Rukaya's tenure as a minister. And they brought in the report. The highlights of the report are exposing some of these issues. I quite agree with my brother here that we seem to be oversimplifying the matter. It's not just about recruiting these children, putting them in a formal system of education, classroom, chalk and board. No, it's far beyond that. It's a system that has gone for many years, as I said earlier on. And that was why, when we came on our government, we also initiated a directorate of societal reorientation. You see, there has to be a lot of reorientation, of change of attitude, as Nuruddin said. Let people understand what exactly this new system, this new approach you're talking about. Sensitize them. In the past, in the 60s, the 70s, up to early 80s, the Malams were not even allowing anybody to get close to their schools. When you come, they will shout and say, well, the Christian missionaries are coming, they will not listen to you, they won't touch you. So we had to create that acceptability, and we went through them. And we sensitized them to accept keeping records. Another aspect is the economic thing. We were addressing their welfare issue, their health care issues. We got some of the younger Malams, took them to train them in first aid services, improve the environment. Some of them that will be congregating and reading under the bonfire overnight. We went to such schools, built a big assembly hall for them, put 2, 3, 4, 5 bulbs, at least so that the environment would look neat. We had a program of buy some few second-hand clothes, giving them, training them. So this is a whole holistic thing, as Nuruddin said. Unless you don't just address the symptoms, you have to go back to address the roots of how the whole thing started and how do you sensitize the Malams to address this. So in that report, all these were highlighted. It's not just building the schools. How I wish when the federal government came into it. Initially, federal government was not getting concerned. They would say these are state matters and so on. And now that it is the problem of the society generally, government is taking interest into it. I hope they will revisit that report. I hadn't the time really to implement it. The report was submitted to us just a few weeks before we left office. In fact, it was even submitted after the election, so we were just busy trying to hand over. But it is a very comprehensive report. It addresses all of these issues that goes beyond just building a school, calling it Sangaya schools or al-majiri schools, and expecting the children to come and be given uniform, exercise books, and bringing the teacher to go and start telling them 2 plus 2. So I think it goes far beyond that. And I am happy that everybody is now concerned, and the issue is now a problem that until and unless it is addressed, it is a very serious challenge to the society. And I believe with schools like that of Nuruddin, if we can encourage the private proprietors of such institutes where they combine the Islamic education, the Quranic education, with this modern approach. But it has to be gradual. If anybody thinks in the next 5-10 years we'll be out of this problem, I think is oversimplifying the matter. But we have to be addressing it gradually. And the states have to come under a common platform, have a template that will be working with. Otherwise, I started this 2003, operated for 8 years, but by the time some states started, it looks like as if we are starting something new again.
Yeah.
But because there was no coordination, many states, including even the state government, probably unless they go back to the records, nobody will remember that we started this in 2003. We've done quite a lot. We have all the records, the personnel are there, the people are there, the directorate is there. But on this issue of lack of continuity in our governments, anybody coming into office, even from the same political platform, and they will have a different approach so that they have this dancing to the gallery as if you are doing something new. But if we go back to the records, I'm sure between 2003 and now, a lot has happened. If there is continuity, in 2012, the BBC reported that Katsina was starting this thing and so on, as if something is the first time this has been addressed. I called the same BBC man who was with us and who had been reporting what we've been doing. I said, look, you are reporting that this is something new, but you know, 10 years ago, we were on this program. But simply because there is no coordination, what Kano is doing, Jigawa, as close as to Kano, doesn't know what we're doing. What Katsina is doing, Kaduna doesn't know. What Bauchi is doing, Gombe doesn't know. What Adama is doing, Taraba doesn't know. So until and unless we agree to come together, and I expect the center should coordinate this, or the governors of the north coming up to set up a common center to agree on how to approach this issue. But oversimplifying it as if you are campaigning, everybody should go to school. I used to tell my colleagues that assuming by tomorrow, all of these parents say, okay, government, we are ready. Here are the children. Are the schools ready? Are the schools ready? We're not ready for them. So until we really sit and plan ahead, while we are campaigning that bring these children to school, how prepared are we? If by tomorrow, all of these 10 million we're talking about will now say, okay, we are convinced, government, here we are. The children are here. Are you ready for them?
Can you absorb them?
Have you absorbed them? What plans have you to absorb them? So we have to take this planning, future planning and projection very seriously before. Well, we're campaigning, but at the same time we're planning. And you can't plan without statistics, without records.
That's right.
Okay, thank you so much, Senator Ibrahim Shekaro. We'll be going to Kaduna now, where Dr. Khalid Abubakar Aliu, Secretary General Jamaatul Nasr Islam, is. You've been listening to this conversation. Let's have your take on it right now.
Thank you, and good morning all. I think these nagging problems centers on governance. And I think we have been talking, and we have talked a lot. So many committees set up, so many works done, a lot of money spent. But I think the real problem is that of governance, seriousness, and commitment to in eradicating or ending the al-majiri syndrome. And you don't see during the political campaigns issues being canvassed on the basis of, in my manifesto, what I intend to do. I want to bring an end to this social menace, which is sociological and sociological and economic problems put together. It is just more than just ending al-majiri in isolation of stabilization of the economy, in isolation of good governance, in isolation of really having to really even bring on board all that is needed to end this menace. When the government really talks about this issue of the al-majiri phenomenon or the Sangha schools syndrome, when government talks about this, I think reasonable thing to do is to look at the primary and secondary schools education as managed by the government. Has the government been able to really achieve the minimum standard in terms of the quality of the structures of these schools, the classrooms, the blackboards? I mean, is there a conducive environment for learning in the primary and secondary schools? Therefore, if we don't see anything positive on this part, then you know that we are but chasing shadows, and this problem will continue nagging, and we don't know when this will end. And I think this is the attitude of the way we do things. We only talk, scratch, and then leave. Lack of synergy, governance, or administration, political administration, or governance is a continuity. And that unfortunately, this dysfunctional thought within the government balance that I come as a governor, or as a minister, or as a president, okay, I'll do away with all the good things that I've started, and I want to start mine. That is why every government will come and now begin to think of how to approach the problem without really taking recourse to what was done before. That is why we are not anywhere, and we are not getting anywhere. I am afraid. I am not a pessimist. I always want to be optimistic, but looking at the government-owned schools that are suffering from acute shortage of whatever can be called as a standard in primary and secondary school education, in terms of manpower, in terms of commitment, in terms of the environment itself. Tell me, how do you even bring something new which has to do with so many dimensions, the sociological, the economic angle, the security angle, the commerce and market and trade? I think government has to be more really serious to look at it this way. And I tell you, there's no need of really having to come and begin a new thing. There are enough literatures, there are enough researches, there are enough of whatever we need. What we need is to walk the talk. That is our problem. Walk the talk. Let us start somewhere. You could see the pandemic of the coronavirus. You could see how countries are really taking measures and steps really to see that this not only epidemic but pandemic is halted and brought to stop. Therefore, until we do a state of an emergency on this syndrome, put together with even the primary and secondary school education. Somewhere you go to a primary school, government-owned primary schools, no windows. Right in the middle of the class, there are potholes which, if you fall, you can even break your leg. The blackboard, there are so many scratches on the blackboard, while the world has graduated from the blackboard to now whiteboard with marker and so on and so forth. I think it is indeed a very serious problem. I think the government has to really head on face this problem, and I think, of course, we must talk, and talking is very important, but talking without working will not really take us anywhere. Let us see these things. Even when the Jonathan's government built these so-called al-majiri schools? Well, of course, schools were built, built on certain considerations other than the real intention of having to really stop this menace. Now, the Sangha of the Malam is in one location and the school is in another location. This is also another problem. Well, schools were built and you just go and ask, Malam, please move to where? Move to where and do what? And that I'm happy to say that I'm part of that ministerial committee of al-majiri integration chaired by Professor Shehu Galadens. Until politics, in terms of even the construction of the schools, specifications were not really followed, and that you want to take away these students. The dormitories are really short of what is required of a dormitory. And in terms of the kitchen, in terms of the classes, in terms of whatever you need to really integrate them, is not there. Therefore, there's no stimulants. There are no stimulants. There are no appetizers that will move these people. Therefore, and today, Nigeria being what it is, there are a lot of NGOs. Each NGO, al-majiri, this and that. What we do is just the elitist approach to it, call for a workshop, talk for one day, take people into hotels in Abuja and finish, and the al-majiri boy does not know anything, and the Malam does not know anything. Right from about 2 decades ago, these things are being done, but I tell you, you do a sampling within the Sangayas, except few that you can even get from them information about this. And indeed, there is a lot of suspicions from the Sangaya school angle. What do these people want? What? And there are some people who ride on these things to feed fat without having to allow for these menace to end. Of course, I want to really appreciate Senator Ibrahim Shekau. Of course, he did very wonderfully in Kano, and I think the reports are there, the records are there. I think if there's continuity in government, I think the syndrome or the menace or this terrible phenomenon of the ball bashing children really becoming an eyesore on the street would have ended in Kano if there's continuity in government. And I think the absence of this continuity and the absence of having nobody to hold responsible, because it is the citizens' right to education, and that it would have been history now. Other countries are coming to learn from us, the way in Indonesia, in Malaysia, all these things, you go and see how beautiful, how durable, and how practicable these Quranic schools are transformed to really mix with, in quotes, the so-called Western education. I think we have to get it right. Getting it right means that we have to work right and do the right thing. Sometimes, if you call for these meetings and you call the al-alamas, the malams, the college, say, you, these elites, you will only call us, give us tea, and let the camera take us and show the world that you are talking to us, but you don't talk the language you understand. And there's no communication between us and you. Just if you have, so these are the problems. That's to call them, show their picture that we are doing something, and in the end there's nothing, and honorarium is given to people who come other than those people. Therefore, it's a vicious cycle that has to end with walking the talk and integrating the al-majiri ball bashing child to school. This is an angle. The other angle, the social angle of it, and I think our social orientation agency has not really delved very seriously into this public campaign and enlightenment. This is indeed another angle. Now, I tell you, if there are friendly economic issues, some of these problems can be solved. Finally, I think the weight of the government has to come heavy for whoever refuses. But the government can't come because it has not provided anything. Of course, you cannot, but if the government is really worried and is serious and really faces this trouble and problem and provides whatever is required and needed, then whoever refuses, now the wrath of the law can come in order to balance the situation.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Khalid, the Secretary General of Jamaatul Nasrul Islam. You've raised a number of very important points, but listening to you and the issues that you are raising, I mean, Juma, I was just wondering. I always talked essentially about the governance challenge, you know, the fact that there's a lot of politics and they are not focusing, yes, on the right things.
Problem with implementation.
Problem with implementation.
Reports. Yes.
And we will return to Dr. Khalid to also talk about the Galantanchi report on seeking to reform the al-majiri. But on communication, I'm sure that if there are a number of potential PhD candidates who are listening to you, you have a number of subject matter issues to worry on which you can actually go on with your research and then come up with your recommendations on how to more effectively communicate with the malams who run the al-majiri system and then how to change their behavior or their disposition towards resistance or breaking down the resistance that they have towards the formal education system or what went wrong before. Now, once again, we understand that our Skype connection to Miriam Dikwa is back on. She's joining us from Gombe. Miriam, very quickly now, before we lose you again, we hope that you are stable this time. Nuruddin says here that, look, we have to have a wide-angle lens view of this issue, not just a tunnel view of education, that the problem is, you know, various ramifications, economic, social, demographic, and so on and so forth. But from the education point of view, how have you tried to accommodate, if at all, these other perspectives in ensuring that you are more you get more service delivery, you get more results from your exactions as an international organization?
Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning, everyone in the studio. Though the connection has not been very friendly, but to some extent, I've listened to some of the arguments that were put by the Senator Ibrahim Sheku, Nordin, and also Dr. Khalid. I think I want to agree with what they all said, you know, concerning this issue of education. And from the UNICEF perspective, we've been doing a lot in terms of supporting government towards its integration scheme, like Senator Ibrahim Sheku said, UNICEF, you know, took the leadership and initiated the establishment of a coordination committee that was led by the National Education Commission, which is the main body for the education. That coordination committee has been established, and then what is really expected is to make sure that all hands on deck, everybody, you know, participates and then contribute to make sure that the planning, the monitoring of the integration scheme is properly done. And then, like Nuruddin said, happen at all levels, and then which UNICEF is also leading and doing in that regard, not just people at the state level, but make making sure that those that are involved, the malams themselves, because we have different types of sangayas, we have different views, we have different thinking, different ways. So that we organize also with all those levels of people, you know, to get their views. But what we do most especially is, you know, to approach the scholars, the religious leaders, and to work with them so they can encourage, you know, parents to accord upbringing of and education of their children adequate attention. And this is what is really required, which we do. And then in some of the messages, we try to make sure that the populace, those that are really affected, understand that Western education is not a sin in any way, but as long as it does not contravene the teaching of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is accepted. Is about knowledge, you know, the Western education. So this type of interventions are some of the things that we do, and also talking to the parents themselves to be cautious about where they send their children, to be cautious about you know, the people they entrust those children to, and then to make sure that, you know, from time to time they even monitor and then pay, you know, to where the children are, and make sure the children are not abused, they are not involved in any form of labor, into any form of hawking or begging. So these are some of the services that we also read. And then in addition to that, at even the community levels, like I said last time, we have established what we call the center-based management committees who support, because
Okay, thank you so much, Mariam Bukar Dikwa. We seem the Skype is really not very working well today. And you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to correct one common error, even among the elites. There's nothing like Western education, Western system of education, Sangaya system of education. It is the system that is different. Education is education, wherever it is. Mathematics is mathematics in America, in Kano, in London, in whatever. Physics is the same. So there is nothing like Western education, because I had her saying Western education. I just felt as an education we should correct this impression.
That's right.
We have Western system of education.
And you cited mathematics because you are a mathematician. And of course you will recall that the way we write 1, 2, 3, 4, the way we write it, those are Arabic numerals.
Yes.
But the number is still the same.
It's still the same, whether a Roman numeral.
It is the system.
Yeah, that's right.
One is one
that
everywhere.
is the same. Yeah.
You know, we have quite a number of tweets that came in this morning, you know, and Nigerians would like to join the conversation. We begin with Ibineme Dominic C. This is long overdue. The Northern society and parents must learn to give birth to the number of children they can take care of and raise properly. Parents who send their children to the street to hustle and survive should be punished.
Now, this is coming from Bashiru. The crucial question to ask is whether the will is there to do so, because it appears most of our leaders do not seem to have a clear understanding of the enormity of the problem at hand, which is capable of consuming us all. And
Omobola on Bab's tweets, the northern state governors have a whole lot to do in ending the al-majiri menace. While individual states can devise mechanisms that suit its environment, there still needs to be synergy among the states to achieve an all-purpose positive result.
Now, Muhammad Inyamida tweets, to end al-majiri on the street, it has to be handled from the following perspectives. Orient people involved on negative impacts such as the practice has on their immediate socio-economic environment, control their birth rate, and take those on the streets off the street and rehabilitate them.
And Steve Bond 007 tweets, some key issues are overlooked. Population control and child marriage. A man that can't feed himself shouldn't have 8 or more children. A girl that is below 18 shouldn't get married in the first place.
Now, Muhammad Ad tweets, ensuring that al-majiris are off the street has been long overdue. Insurgency and luring al-majiri for insurgency and other vices have brought us to the present insecurity, including kidnapping and armed robbery.
And Daily Jack Solomon tweets, we need to stop looking at the al-majiri child as the problem. They are the effect of failed leadership, and they are the victims of how the system has failed Nigerians. The problem are poor governance, bad leadership, compromise cultural and traditional beliefs and ideologies.
Al-majiri Morufu, politicians are the ones using them, that's al-majiri, for their selfish end. Worst of all, they bring them into the country from neighboring countries. Our immigration officers have a task to curtail this menace.
And Mike Anyako tweets, we collectively need a holistic approach to end al-majiri from our streets. There must be a penal law promulgated from all local government areas in Nigeria to make it a punishable offense for anyone or parent to send any child on the street for begging purposes. We may call it al-majiri.
All right, Badamasi Adamu says the remedy to this is poverty alleviation, food and shelter for the people, usually with the political office holders who have failed to deliver on their social contract.
And Law Alpha-C tweets, the only way to curb al-majiri in Nigeria, even in other climes, is to encourage and insist on education from the onset.
Now, Abdul Hamid Ado tweets, al-majiri is an old tradition that worked well, but not now. The struggle for food, shelter and clothing always undermines the attainment of the desired goals of the al-majiri system. It's also important to note that some of these al-majiri are foreigners.
Yes, and Yerima Alhaji Hamza tweets, there are two different things, that is al-majiri and others, people begging on streets, but they are not al-majiri. But for the al-majiri begging on streets, government has to provide a well-defined system which operates within the law.
Now, Abdul tweets, illiteracy is one reason that is causing the al-majiri syndrome to persist. I suggest aggressive education and enlightenment to the northern populace, and also strong legislation and enforcement against those parents who promote the al-majiri system. The northern governors must come up with laws that will provide sustainable educational policies and make it possible for both Islamic and Western education, put in parentheses, Western system of education, to be pursued with minimal stress. It's a task that must be done to remove the al-majiri from the streets.
And Cecilia Okoroma tweets, the only way to get the al-majiri off our streets is for them to be properly catered for. They need food, homes, education, shoes, clothes and love. They need basic things of life to behave, function and think right. Care is the answer.
All right, so those are the tweets that we can take in the meantime. We're going on a short break now. When we return, we'll go back to our guests. All right, welcome back. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We still have our guests with us. Let's return to Nuruddin. Nuruddin, I mean, the key points, I'm sure there will be others. If we had 100 guests, each of them will come with additional perspectives. One key thing here is the gap in governance, in visioning to say, look, this is a major social problem, not just for the North, but also for the rest of the country. There appears also to be no shortage of proposals on what to do. There's the Shehu Galadanchi report, and as Dr. Khalid said, workshops and seminars, on and on and on. Now, what can key influencers in the North do? Individuals and pressure groups to just take up the bulletized points, such as you have said. What we are dealing with here is a challenge of the economy of the poor, and we are seeing how rural poverty has aggravated this. We are dealing with a problem of child trafficking and so on and so forth, and with the deleterious consequences we're having in terms of security and otherwise. So how do you get influential entities such as yours to say, look, these are the matters on the table. Can we focus on these things and run with them, irrespective of political party, irrespective of whatever creed that the individual preaches?
I think the problem sometimes with a holistic approach is you present something as being very complex, and that complexity or that analysis creates paralysis. And people then start feeling, I can't do anything because there's also that other thing that needs to be done, etc., etc. I think when handling something this complicated, there's no either or. There's always and. There's no should we do this or should we do this. No. Everything has its place. And it's one where I think we can't solve certain problems in our communities or think we can sustain a solution if poverty is going to keep glaring us in the face. Among the tweets that came were those who are concerned about population increment. Why is it everywhere in the world where you have the highest level of poverty, you have the highest level of population growth. Because in the mind of the poor person, for many of us, we've got our pension funds, we've got some financial security. For the poor person, he is thinking, or she is thinking, when I get to 60, 70 and can no more farm, can no more work, who will take care of me? And so for many, children are their retirement packages. And they know out of every 3 children you have, most likely one will die. Why? Because you can't even afford his own medication or her own medication. And so many issues to do with the population growth rate. For the poor person, population is an asset for old age. But when you look at it from a national perspective, you say, but this is a liability because this is not an educated population. Or at least, let's not even say they are not educated. We use the word out of school children instead of recognizing many of them are in school, but just a different kind of school. And when you look at, say, the statistics that the Honorable Senator Ibrahim Sheikhow mentioned, when at a particular time you have up to 27,000 schools, not students, schools, it means you have up to 27,000 teachers, and these teachers usually have assistants. You find you are dealing with hundreds of thousands of students within this system. To start thinking you want to get them out of that system into something, which kind of buildings are you going to put even 27,000 students, not about 27,000 schools and that type of system. So could we start thinking of ways of not just, and as I said, not either or, but not just how do we get some of these into the integrated schools, but how do you take education to them? How do you say, you know what, you are under a tree and you don't have a blackboard, but you have your allo, the wooden board. How do we take education to them? How do we get them to adopt certain subjects? When you look at the traditional system, we have to remember, if you look at their educational curriculum, if you pick a classical book of Islamic jurisprudence like Muwatta Malik or any of these Risala, these books, yes, they will start teaching you ablution and how to pray and fasting and zakat and all of that. But before long, you are in the book of marriage. Rules of marriage, responsibilities of parents, you'll start discussing that. Before you go far, you'll start reading books to do with how to manage divorce and child custody. Then you go to books on business and Islamic finance and economics, etc. And then you go to issues to do with state issues, etc. In other words, the traditional curriculum was a curriculum that took people through it until they reached a very high level of education and exposure that they were able to handle a whole civilization. So strong that when the British came, they felt, actually, leave their legal system in place, just reduce its authority in the following ways, leave their traditional system in place. So the point I'm trying to make here is, one, instead of looking how do we bring them all to our type of education, what are those critical aspects of our education that can be taken to them? One. Secondly, this maxim, nothing about us without us. You can't solve the issue of al-majiri without the al-majiri. You know, the idea of let's just have a workshop and you don't take them along in the planning and in the decision of what to execute and in the execution, it's bound to fail. Why? Because we don't come from that paradigm and we're not adequately sensitive. Lastly, when we look at the type of education and look at the scale, I think we need to start, as they say, if you forgive me for using the term, thinking out of the box. Our thinking has generally been, let us teach them English, teach them maths, and then they will have a better future. But how well has that worked, even for those who have said, and the majority of these Malams are actually ready to cooperate. The majority are ready to cooperate with the integrated schools, etc. But if it's not working as well as we would like, let's ask ourselves a few other questions. Is there, when you look, if you look at your vulcanizer, who is usually a Yoruba man, or mechanic, or the bricklayer, the mason, the plumber, who would come from other parts of the country usually, how much literacy and numeracy do these people usually have? Nearly none. When you ask your mechanic, write me a list of the things, just look at the English. But when you find, we try...
Including shock absorber.
Yeah, exactly. You need a shock absorber to absorb that literacy rate. So, the Yoruba man did not need English to be an apprentice and learn how to be a professional in his guild. The Igbo man did not need English. They learned these guilds in their own local language, or local languages. When you go to meet them in their professions now, when you take your car, you will most likely have to speak Hausa to him. You will still be speaking a local language. So the question is, while English is important in many ways, is it really essential? When we say literacy is important, that is true. But what for? To take notes from what the teacher is saying, to be able to go and revise. But in less than 3 to 4 months, if we were ready to consider teaching Ajami, we still have Ajami on our Naira notes, which is Hausa, but with the Arabic alphabet. There are a few other alphabets like Tsa and Ta that are not in Arabic that have been introduced into the Ajami. But whereas after 6 to 12 years of primary and secondary school, this al-majiri boy still can't construct a comprehensive sentence in English, in less than 3 months, he can read and write Ajami fluently. If you ask his Malam, do you know any maths? For many of us, they don't know maths. But ask the Malam, can you calculate zakat, how much to give out of zakat? He knows percentages, he knows ratios. You ask the Malam, do you know how to calculate inheritance in Islamic law?
He knows.
He will start showing you LCM, adding fractions, dividing, multiplication. In other words, we do have things that are within the current al-majiri system. With these 27,000 teachers and schools, we have competencies that we can plug into. Let them learn Ajami. Let them learn Hausa Mboku. In other words, writing Hausa with the Latin or English alphabet. They will have enough literacy, numeracy, to now go into guilds with better qualifications and not with the lack of skills.
And while they are doing that, you can then infuse aspects of science and tech.
Absolutely.
And just by the way, I mean, while the conversation is going on, Dr. Umar Bindre, most recently Secretary of the State Government of Adamawa State, it was also the past had been DG of NOTAP, sent in a message to say that the slate, that's the slate that you that the wiper, that he has a patent for a slate, but a tablet that can incorporate all forms of knowledge that can be used. So as Nuruddin is saying, look, take education to them, or take aspects of education, or even technology to them, so that they can infuse this.
They're taking the system. What they're doing is already education.
Yeah, education. Yeah, just aspects of
bringing in the system. Even the current curriculum as we have it, even in the Western system of education, it is there up till today. The first 3 years of the primary school has to be taught in the local language. How many of the schools are operating in this? How many of the schools are complying?
That's right.
How many states are enforcing this? That primary 1, 2, 3, except in the lesson of English language. All other instructions have to be in the local language. But you and I today, if you send your child to even pre-primary school, you want him to come back and start saying, good morning, ma, how are you? You think he's acquiring education. That's not education.
So my children have to greet me in Edo language.
Absolutely.
And every family in Benin has its own greeting. So that's what they will greet me with. They will greet their mother.
Not good morning and how are you?
Greet me good morning.
No.
in as much as some of these issues are funny, we need to look at the psychological and, you know, effects on these children, exposed to the elements, abused by society. Do you think growing up they will have empathy for the society itself?
Well, I think it all depends on the parental orientation, because every child grows with what his parents make him to be. And this is why I still want to emphasize we introduced the societal orientation program. In fact, up to today, I claim that it is the most of the peak of and one of the programs that I'm very proud of. Because we realize that all of these things, if you want people to queue in, you have to really carry them along. Let them understand you. And our societal orientation program did quite a lot sensitization. And that's why we had peace. Culture, religion, understanding, going to them, and let them understand that you mean well. Even the immunization programs and so on, you have to really sensitize people through, we have to change the attitude. All of what we do is about our attitude, even discipline. You know, corruption is an attitudinal matter, it's a natural problem. So unless we really understand this, and the governments understand this, that it's not just about building the school, as Nuruddin is saying, oversimplifying the matter, bring them on and start teaching them 2 plus 2, 3 plus 3, how are you, and so it's not the issue. Agree that they have a system of education. That's why when we introduced this Angaya program in Kano, we did not rush in changing their curriculum to generate their acceptability. We said, okay, let them remain in their Quranic studies, improve the environment, enlighten the malams. We took the younger ones and gave them some skills. We trained some of them to be tailors, to be mechanics, to be this, to be that, so that during the time when they are not in session, they will be able to have an income to depend on. Part of the problem, as he said, poverty, because the malams managing these thousands of schools don't have any skill, so they have to depend on sending these children to go and beg and bring food for them to survive. But if they have skills, in fact, the rural schools, we started giving them grants, giving them fertilizer, giving them seeds, encouraging them, in from local government, we encourage them to even give them land to do the farming, so that they produce what to eat for the year. So gradually, we had some pilot programs that had already taken a lot of the local government out of this begging program.
You know what, Your Excellency, part of the governor's challenge, why aren't we having continuity? That's one. Two, why has it been so difficult to have a groundswell of determination and commitment, as Dr. Khalid was saying, that look, we have this social problem, let's synergize, let's have a template so that, you know, one is not pulling in the other direction while taking care of peculiar domestic or state circumstances?
Well, I think, with all due respect, without running down anybody, we are still not getting it right in the kind of leadership we do get politically. I must say this. People going into office without probably even understanding what they are going there to do. Secondly, the states are too independent. You know, in the name of democracy, there's nothing in common. We have the same problem. If you go to any of these regions, I've just mentioned a moment ago, what culture, what attitude do you have in Jigawa which is not in Kano? But we're not working together. Nobody knows what is going on. If you go to Ogun, Ogun doesn't know what Oshun is doing. If you go to Cross River, they don't know what Rivers is doing. Bayelsa doesn't know what Rivers is doing. And yet, they are one. The language is the same, the culture is the same. If you take, for example, Northwest or Southwest or Southeast, there's this homogeneity of language, there's homogeneity of the religion. So all of the problem, any problem you identify in any of these regions, you find that it's common to all of them. So this over-independence of the way we operate. And my understanding that we did quite a lot. You see, when we did the Tsangaya program, through the Arewa House program, where the current executive secretary of UBEC is, he was the then director of Arewa House. Together with my directorate of Tsangaya program, we went to the meeting of the northern governors. We made almost 2-3 hours presentation that this is what we have developed for the Tsangaya program, with the hope that other states will queue in and let's work together. You'll be surprised that one of the governors just said, is it from an AMPP government that we would learn some of these things? This is how bad it is.
End of story.
How bad it is, because that time we had only about 3, 4, 5 MPP governments in the north, all the rest were PDP. And simply because you are PDP and MPP, and I brought something good, you think because we are in different parties, you are not ready to take it. It's so sad, the kind of leadership. And I'm beginning to feel unless we really sensitize the electorate to vote in the right people in office who really understand the aspirations of the community and the challenges.
Okay, thank you so much, distinguished Senator Ibrahim Sheikh. We'll be going to Kaduna now, where Dr. Khalid Abubakar Aliu briefly to give us his closing comments.
I think we must correct some really thoughts and concepts. Now, thinking that the Sangha or the al-majiri system beats Boko Haram, this is not true. The fact that those, even within the Boko Haram closed enclaves, some of them are graduates and so on and so forth. Now, I think let us do a holistic, really look at these problems. Now, other social problems of these, the exodus of the graduates at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels in this country in millions, what is this really telling this country? The future of the security of this country. As long as there's no job security, there's no food security, there's no shelter security, and so on and so forth, then we'll have a problem. In my first submission, the issue is that of governance. And unless and until you elect people who can deliver, people who know the job, people who have the passion, people who have the capacity and can do it, we can't reach anywhere. And I think we are on a time bomb, and we hope God will save us as graciously is doing that, but we really have to really work seriously. Now, if this is a social problem, well, even you're looking at this only from the point of view of the North. Other regions also have their own problems of insecurity, dropouts from schools, other social, political and economic problems also. And there are good stories even in the North. There are schools that have really merged together the Quranic and the so-called Western education together, because education is universal. And our thinking in Nigeria is when you speak English language. What do you tell in Japan, somebody who will develop micro-electronic device, if you tell him good morning, he doesn't know what good morning is all about. Education is about creativity and being positive in social, political, and economic development. There are good stories indeed in the North. There are very, very good schools, which really will be the envy of all, which merges both the education being imparted in English and the other education being imparted in either Arabic and so on and so forth. I like one very courageous woman in one of that woman's submission in one of the United Nations assemblies that said, we think that education is about speaking English, it's about Western education. There's nothing like that. There are people in India, in China, in the Middle East, in Africa, with volumes and volumes of education, which if used can do a wonderful transformation of the socio-economic and scientific developments in the world, but because they don't speak English. Our problem is even colonizing our own language, the way we speak and so on and so forth. But there are people now in
Dr. Khalid, thanks. We've run out of time, so it's painful for us to say goodbye, but certainly, I mean, a number of points that have been raised. I mean, we've talked about education and education. That's that philosophical approach. I mean, former education minister is here. Philosophy of education is one of the core points about education, plus, of course, history of education, sociology of education, and so on and so forth. Education is one of the most potent vehicles for the transmission of cultural values. Yes. And if you don't have a culture, you are not a human being. So the mode of communication could be any language. Once that language is developed to a high extent, that of course will be very interesting. Dr. Khalid Aliyu, Secretary General Jamaatul Nasrul Islam, thank you very much for joining us from our Kaduna Network Center. We also would like to appreciate Miriama Dikwa, Education Specialist of the Bochu Field Office of UNICEF. She joined us via Skype from Gombe. I would like to thank you, even though we had some disruptions to your Skype connection. Thanks a lot for your contribution. And here with us in the Abuja studios, Nuruddin Lemu, Director, Research and Training of the Islamic Education Trust Fund. Thanks a lot, Nuruddin, for your insights. Thank you. And last but not the least, His Excellency, former Governor of Kano State, former Minister of the Federal Republic, Minister of Education, and now Senator representing Kano Municipal. Thanks a lot for being around on Good Morning Nigeria. Yes. Kano Central.
So you have Kano Municipal Local Government.
Oh, Municipal, okay. Central. Why are you denying Municipal? All right, he's also a mathematician. Okay, so that does it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. We'd like to thank you for being with us. The program is back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Juma Yusuf. Do have a wonderful day.